Question 3 for the record that I submitted. Where did the money come from for the payment of the $32 million settlement in connection with the low-caste case? Response, the settlement funds come from the amounts collected to fund SFCNY operations after it pays its vendors. Do you at least acknowledge that your answer was evasive?
No, sir. Senator, respectfully, I disagree. I could not, I was bound not to discuss the details of the settlement agreement. I took that confidentiality agreement very seriously. So I don't agree, I'm sorry. I think I answered it truthfully and to the best of my ability and to the best of what I was allowed to tell you because I was subject to this confidentiality agreement. You
answered it truthfully, but left the impression that $32 million was paid rather than only 2% of that amount.
Well, respectfully, Senator, I could not talk about the $700,000. I was barred from doing that in writing. I know you have a copy of the settlement agreement. You can see right there that I'm barred from putting the terms of the settlement agreement in writing. So I answered it as directly and honestly as I could without violating my duty to keep the settlement agreement confidential. It's very unfortunate that it was leaked to the press and leaked very selectively. I actually have screenshots of some of the selective pages of the settlement agreement that were leaked to the press, and that has, I think, allowed for a lot of misinformation to bubble up.
Let me ask you then, you and I obviously disagree on that matter. Let's move on to the recusal letter. Whose idea was that?
Well, it was my idea, but I did consult with, I have a bunch of outside advisors who are smarter than I am. I wanted to make sure that the scope of the recusal was not too broad.
Did any members of Congress suggest to you that that might be helpful?
Well, sir, if you don't mind, I did speak with committee staff about it. I asked them whether they thought it was a smart idea. I asked them whether, it might allay some of the concerns. So I did speak to committee staff about it, yes. And, I think the general thought was, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Was this suggested to you by the administration?
No.
Coming down from the president?
Quite the opposite, sir. They were very, very much opposed to me recusing at all.
Now, your rationale for recusal on the retransmission issue was based on a past filing from your organization known as Public Knowledge, is that correct? And it was a proceeding before the FCC. The question that is out there is, why stop there if you're going to use this rationale? You have filed comments on other issues before the FCC, including Universal Service Fund, rate regulation. Based on this rationale, why did you limit it to simply that one filing? And is it true that your recusal is voluntary, that there's no enforcement mechanism, and that you could change your mind at any point and withdraw the recusal?
I'll answer the second part first.
Please, ma'am.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's voluntary, and I would not do that without seeking counsel from the ethics officials at the FCC, as I will do for many issues. But yes, I could withdraw it. I mean, that's exactly what Chairman Kennard did. He consulted with ethics counsel. He had voluntarily recused. He consulted with ethics counsel, and they said, well, you know what? It was 20 years ago when you were an NAB intern. You don't have to recuse anymore. So I could. I'm not likely to. Similarly, I don't actually see any of these issues coming before the full commission, which we can talk about. But yes, I could. And could you repeat the first part of your question?
This is one of just many filings that you filed on behalf of Public Knowledge. And I mentioned Rate Regulation Universal Service Fund as two of those.
So let me talk about that. This recusal is really what I would call a purple cow. okay? It's at the nexus of the low-caste litigation and a filing I made 12 years ago, okay? There's no other such nexus that you can find, okay? I was trying to address the concerns of this committee around the low-caste litigation and whether I would be biased, okay? And I connected that to a petition for rulemaking that I personally signed, okay, 12 years ago, that addresses some of the same issues raised in the litigation. So no, I think to recuse from everything that public knowledge ever filed is without limits and basically prohibit any public advocate, again, and not necessarily somebody in the nonprofit sector. It could be somebody who worked for a corporation or somebody who worked at a law firm. It would prohibit them from being an FCC commissioner as well. So what you'd have is an FCC full of people with no knowledge about the issues, about media communications policy. I don't think, Senator, anybody really wants that.
Senator Blumenthal.